Guild Wars, Sea of Sorrows. Chapter 22. It was nearly noon by the time Kobaya escaped the brutality's hold. He was forced to wait until harbor traffic slowed before he could slip back down the anchor chain into the sea. Wet and angry, he swam to shore a few piers down from the char dock. There, Kobaya pulled off his boots with a grimace. He dumped 2 long streams of water onto the sand. There was no time to change his clothes or shower. The captain's meeting would begin in less than an hour, and he had to get there quickly. Kobaya shook the sand from his clothing as best he could and headed into the city streets. Lion's Arch was filled with hustle and bustle, merchants selling their wares and eager crewmen on leave spending time in the city. Kobaya would usually have enjoyed a stroll through the alleys, but today he had no time for pleasantries or idle curiosity. He made his way toward the pavilion on the cliff with hurried steps. Near the center of the city, he detoured to pass the primary Lion Guard outpost, where Captain Ducerme's militia was releasing 2 battered char into the street. "You're lucky," Ducerme scolded them. "Next time I catch you fighting on the docks, I won't let you out of the drunk tank for 3 days. He chuckled at their discontent, his portly belly bouncing over a tightly cinched belt. Noting Kobaya, the captain stiffened and managed a half-hearted salute. "Captain Mariner," he stammered. "What brings you down here?" "Captain, I say," Kobaya answered. "Is she in there?" "No, sir." Ducerme gave him a lopsided grin. "Got bailed out a half-hour ago by your Asaran pilot, both the captain and her mate." They headed that way. He gestured vaguely toward the pavilion. "Right." Ignoring the man's attempts to make polite conversation, Kobaya renewed his haste toward the council building. He could hear Ducerme's voice fading behind him. He was muttering something about the discourtesy of those in charge. Kobaya took the steps to the pavilion 3 at a time, bustling up toward the high cliff. He could see some of the captains already gathered at the front door of the building. A voice caught his attention, and he paused to look along the building's side. Hengst stood there, bristling, hands on his weapons. In front of him stood Matcha, a sword belt wrapped over her shoulder, the cutlass poking out like Bronze Fard's ever-present greatsword. "How dare you try to blackmail me?" Hengst snarled. "You conniving little runt. I got you out of that mess. You got me into it. What the hell are you doing, Hengst?" Kobaya strode up to them angrily. "Leave her alone." Mariner, eyes flashing, Hengst rounded on Kobaya. "Don't tell me what to do." Impulsively, Matcha seized Hengst's distraction to stomp on his foot with all her might, causing the dark-haired warrior to let out a screech of surprise and pain. "Show some gratitude, you fish-livered blackguard, or next time she shoved him backward, I'll leave you in prison where you belong." Hengst hopped up and down, looking for a moment as if he might draw his swords, but Kobaya stepped close to meet the Ascalonian's eyes. "Do we need to have this little lesson again, Hengst?" Kobaya's voice was calm, but his eyes were fierce. "Leave my crew alone." "You heard him," Masha added smugly from behind Kobaya's legs. Visibly losing his eagerness for the fight, Hengst gathered himself and stepped back. His black eyes were heated and his face red from anger, but he managed to speak in an even tone. "Fine," he said tensely, "but I don't owe you anything, Matcha. If I have to pay, then so will you." He shot a nasty glance at the Asura. Kobaya glowered. "That's enough, Hengst." Hengst turned on his heel and limped toward the pavilion, trying to salvage his pride. Kobaya mused smugly, pleased at his rival's discomfort. Few things put him in a better mood than taking the wind out of the Ascalonian sails. What was that all about? Matcha smiled sweetly, hugging Kobaya's legs. "I told him that he had to pay me back the money for his bail. He didn't agree." She stuck out her tongue at the man's back as he retreated. "Oh, and I brought your sword." Matcha slipped the belt over her shoulder and held out the weapon in its scabbard. "I thought you might need it, given how today's going." Kobaya laughed out loud. Thanks, Matcha. Before she could dart away into the building, Kobaya reined her in by the braids. Hang on. I need to tell you what I found on Grimjaw's ship. She paused and looked up at him inquisitively, and Kobaya pitched his voice low. We were right. Grimjaw made that bomb. And it's not the only one. He had another, and he's hidden it somewhere in the captain's council. Matcha's eyes flew wide open. Inside the building? Yeah. Kobaya nodded, buckling the sword belt around his waist. It's all right, though. I have a plan. Grimjaw's not going to set off the bomb while he's inside the building. All we have to do is wait until he tries to leave, and then see who he takes with him. That's how we'll know who he's working with. Matcha started to protest, but Kobaya cut her off. Yes, I know it's dangerous, but it's our only hope to find out who's really behind this. Kobaya, this isn't someone you can bluff or a ship you can outmaneuver. This is a bomb. What if Grimjaw said it wrong? What if the real villain isn't even in there and sets it off before Grimjaw's ready? Matcha grabbed Kobaya's sleeve. This is a crazy plan, Kobaya. We should tell the others what's going on and get out of here. Why are we risking our lives? If we do that, we've foiled one plan, but we haven't caught the culprit. They'll try again, and next time they'll catch us by surprise. Is this city really that important? She pleaded. Enough to get killed over? Look, we could just sail away and let this all sort itself out. The Pride Kobaya put his hand on Matcha's shoulder. Matcha, you're a good friend, and you've been with me through some very difficult times. I don't know if I ever really told you how much you mean to me. I've been busy lately, and it's taken me away from you and the others. I'm sorry. Maybe that makes me a bad friend. If it does, I hope you forgive me. Matcha placed her hand over his. You've never been anything but good to me, Kobaya. I'd do anything for you. I'd die for you. Like Vera did for Isay. You're my captain. Then you understand how important this is. Lion's Arch is the first city that's really been a home to all the people of Tyria, no matter what race they are, or where they come from. It's known real freedom. He slid his hand away and headed up the stairs. That's worth fighting for. As Kobaya walked toward the building, Matcha looked up at the sky, pursing her lips, and then down at the cobblestones that ran through the city streets. Then she followed him, dragging her feet reluctantly up the stairs toward the pavilion. Hedda and Moran were already seated at the table, arguing over some point of seafaring lore. Grimjaw was sitting near the others, his long claws tapping the table in a slow, calculated rhythm. Isay was there too, sitting beside Nodobe, their seconds chatting pleasantly behind them. Isay appeared no worse for wear from her fight on the docks or her time in detention. She'd apparently been able to arrange a change of clothing, and she had placed a small bandage over her eye, where a blow had split the skin. Nodobe took her arm as they laughed over some story, his broad smile shockingly white against ebony skin. The familiarity rankled, but Kobaya was so glad to see her alive and well that the feeling washed away like water over a drake's back. She noticed Kobaya at the door and gave him a joyful smile. As soon as Kobaya entered the council room, the Asuran captain, Tarb, strode toward him, muttering in a dark tone. Mariner, I want to talk to you, Tarb said. Right here and right now. Kobaya slowed. What's the problem, Tarb? He said cautiously, struggling to appear interested while keeping an eye on the 5 at the table. Why aren't you willing to compromise on the Claw Island thing? It's been years since they started building on the island, and it could be years more before they're done. What I'm calling for will help the city now. A bank. More shops. Are you deliberately stifling the city's growth? Tarb puffed up like a little rooster. Behind him walked his second, Gamina, carrying a tablet on which she was taking notes. Kobaya tried to follow the Asura's argument, but his mind was on other things. Can we talk about this during the meeting? I want an answer now. An honest answer, not one prettified for politics. Tarb shoved his finger up toward Kobaya's face. Are you getting a cut from the contractors? A promise of military authority to back you on the council? What is it? What? No, nothing like that. I just want the city to be safe. Tarb fixed him with a steely gaze. Whatever you say, Mariner, the warrior grumbled. But I know payoff when I smell it. I just want you to know I'm watching you. Tarb pointed at his eyes, then at Kobaya, and then stalked off toward the table, unslinging the warhammer from his back with a resounding whomp. Gamina paused, looked up at Kobaya awkwardly, then shrugged and followed her captain to his seat. One by one, the seats at the table were filling. Kobaya deliberately took the chair across from Grimjaw, meeting the Char's eyes without shrinking. Grimjaw grinned, showing all of his snaggled, uneven teeth. It turned Kobaya's stomach to smile pleasantly back, but he managed. Yam was last to arrive, shuffling along in a heavy new robe ornamented with anchors, gold braid, and shiny buttons shaped like lions' heads. He waved his arms as he walked, deliberately showing off the ornate trim on the sleeves. Matcha rolled her eyes. I was hoping he'd sleep through the meeting, she muttered, a little too loud. Yam shot her a nasty look. Are we all here then? Notaby made a show of counting chairs. 8. Good. Then let us all sit and discuss the future of our city. Kobaya tensed, watching Grimjaw out of the corner of his eye. The Char shifted in his seat, but showed no sign of leaving. She looked at Kobaya questioningly, and he gave her a smile. There was no opportunity to tell Asay what he'd found aboard the Brutality. And even if he could, it would only worry her, as it had Matcha. This council was called to vote on the future of the city's monetary concerns. Nodobi reclined comfortably in his chair, looking for all the world as if he were addressing a room filled with his personal followers. Yesterday, it had rankled Kobaya to see Nodobi act like he was in charge. Today, Kobaya had far too much on his mind to try to compete. Nodobi continued. Thanks to Yam, excuse me, Captain Yam, the city's treasury currently has enough gold to address some significant issues. Like finishing the fortress, Hedda chimed in. Tarb said, or building a bank. By my Golmatronic grandmother, can we talk about that? I'm tired of keeping my money in my ship's hold. I'm a sailor, not a banker. Laughing softly, Notaby held up his palms. We could do any of these things, assuredly. But we cannot do them all. The question before the council is, which should we choose? Should we vote first? Kobaya said quickly. It seemed we were tangled in argument yesterday. I'm curious to see where the council stands this morning. If we have a tangible majority, then it will save us time spent flapping our jaws. An excellent point, Captain Mariner, Notaby agreed. Shall we vote on the primary allocation then? All those in favor of spending the majority of the money on our city's defense, more guns on the northern cliff, finishing the fortress on Claw Island, and increasing the city guard, raise your hand. Kobaya lifted his as he spoke, holding his palm above his shoulder. Moran's hand shot up. I've seen what those undead freighters can do. I don't want to take any chances. Hedda raised hers more slowly. After a moment, Notaby said, 3. Very well. All those in favor of using the revenue on necessary internal upgrades, a bank, better roads into Kriata and through the Shiver Peaks, more buildings to house shops and trade. He lifted his hand, looking around the table expectantly. Tarb was the first to join him, which was no surprise at all. Yam's hand waved pointedly in the air as the shopkeep puffed up in smug contentment. Grimjaw made a show of pretending to consider both sides, rubbing his whiskers and flapping all 4 ears. At last, the Char captain lifted his hand in affirmation, claws glinting in the sunshine that streamed down through the high windows. I say, Tarb asked. Your vote? What does it matter? Grimjaw jeered. 4-3 in favor. She exchanged a glance with her second, and Henst put his hand on her arm reassuringly. I think Lion's Arch needs upgrades in multiple areas if the city is going to thrive. I don't see why we can't split the money between the two. An abstention is still 4-3. Grimjaw lowered his hands to the table, claws sinking into the thick wood. We win. One moment. Let's hear her out. If Isay casts her vote in agreement with us, Moran argued, we'd be tied at 4-4 until someone changes sides. That could take weeks. Tarb groaned. I have a vessel to run. Shipping deadlines to make. If I'm stuck here until Winter's Day, how am I going to pay my crew? The Char rumbled angrily and turned toward Isai. Look, Isai, I know we've had our differences, but as you're the one that started the fight that landed my crewmen in the clink this morning, I figure you owe me some consideration. Grimjaw forcibly relaxed his fists and placed his paw-like hands on the table. I want a word with you about your concerns, to see if you and I can come to a compromise. Then we'll have another vote. This time, no abstentions. Nodobi tapped his fingers together. Fine. We'll recess for 5 minutes. But let me tell you this, Grimjaw. Nodobi leaned toward the snaggletooth Char and put ice in his voice. If you bully her, if I hear one whiff of trouble, the Elonian narrowed his eyes. I'll see you in chains, pulling at my ship's oars. Understood? Visibly disturbed at the thought, Grimjaw nodded brusquely. He rose from the table and gestured to Isai to follow him toward the front of the pavilion. There he goes, Matcha hissed. It's Isai. We have to follow her. Kobaya's breath caught in his throat. What? It can't be Isai. She wouldn't blow up her own ship, especially not while she was on it. She wouldn't leave me here to die. Maybe you care a lot more for her than she does for you, Kobaya, Matcha said bitterly. She's Kreadan, remember? She works for Bade. I bet he's behind this. Simo, we have to follow them. He'll be king of Lion's Arch. Kobaya considered the thought fleetingly, and then shook his head. Isay loves me. That was her ship. Virud was her friend, and that bomb killed him. It doesn't make sense. There's no possible way it's Isay. Grimjaw is going to come back into the room and then leave again with the real traitor. If we go after him now, we're giving ourselves away. I trust Isay, Matcha. We just have to be patient. Refusing to consider the alternative, Kobaya crossed his arms and settled into his chair. Around them, the other captains had broken into small talk and pleasantries, discussing the weather and their next trade runs. Matcha tugged harder at his sleeve. Maybe I'm wrong, but can we take the chance? Get up, Kobe. We can't stay here. Please. Kobaya. A bead of perspiration ran down the Asura's forehead, trickling across her temple and vanishing into her braids. Kobaya had never seen her so jittery. Something was definitely wrong. Calm down, Matcha, he said, taken aback. No, really. Trust me, get up. We have to go. To follow them, I mean. He twisted in his chair, staring at Masha in confusion. Why was she so insistent, unless... She wasn't just worried, she was panicking. A similar image leapt into Kobia's mind. Matcha, racing down the dock just before the bomb exploded, the same frightened look on her face. She said she'd merely followed the messenger, but when Matcha was running up the Nomad's gangplank, she was yelling a warning. Matcha? He gripped her arm. How did you know about the bomb? There's no time to argue, Kobaya. They're getting away. We have to go after Grimjaw. Her voice trailed off urgently. The package on the Nomad. How did you know it was dangerous? Instead of answering, Matcha stammered, and Kobaya tightened his grip on her arm. It was just an ordinary brown paper package, Matcha. It could have been anything. It didn't look like a bomb. Why were you in such a panic if you didn't know what it was? Kobaya, you're wasting time. She trembled. By now, Everyone at the table was staring at them. Matcha yelped as Kobaya's hand clenched her wrist. Aisei could be in danger. You were Grimjaw's courier. You snuck onto Aisei's ship and placed the bomb in front of her cabin. You must have seen my coat on the pylon as you were leaving. That's when you realized I was aboard. That's when you started yelling for me to get off the ship. Kobaya, I'd never do anything to hurt you. Matcha twisted in his grasp. The others couldn't hear the whispered words, but they could see that Kobaya's face was flushed with rage. Not me, maybe. But Isaye? Kobaya's mind was racing. He jerked the Asura closer, growling in rage. By Dwayna, now I understand. Without Isaye, I don't have any reason to stay in Lion's Arch. In fact, I'd want to leave. Isn't that what I told you the morning before the bomb was set? He shook the Asura roughly. Are you behind all this, Matcha? No, Matcha protested. But I know who is. And yes, I helped him. But that's why we were arguing. I changed my mind. I was going to tell you the truth. You have to believe me. I didn't know there was a bomb here. He was willing to kill me, too. Tears ran down the Asura's cheeks, falling on her robin's egg blue robe. Please, Colby, you have to understand. I wanted to get out of this stinking city. I just wanted our life back sailing on the Pride with all of our friends. Like it was before, I say. Who sent the bomb, Matcha? With tears still running down her cheeks, Matcha pointed across the room. He did. Kobaya turned to follow her accusatory finger and saw Isaye and Grimjaw, headed out the front doors of the pavilion, their seconds at their sides. Aisei, Grimjaw. Grimjaw's second, Croaker, and Isaye's second, Henst. And just like that, everything fell into place. My grandfather was a member of the Ascalonian nobility. Mr. I'm the Prince of Ascalon. He'll be King of Lion's Arch. Kobaya hurled himself up out of the chair, still gripping the Asura's wrist. I say, he shouted. The small group paused at the doorway. Henst sent the bomb. He was trying to kill you and inherit your seat on the captain's council. If you let him leave the room, we're all going to die. Everyone in the room froze in surprise, and Hedda let out a little gasp. Aisei stared at Kobaya in utter disbelief. Nodobi was the first to speak. The dark-skinned captain said slowly, That's a serious accusation, Captain Mariner. Do you have any evidence? Yeah. Looks like I do, Kobaya said, pulling Matcha forward. He rounded on the Asura. This is your one chance, Matcha. Explain, or I swear. I'll sit down. Grimjaw will blow that bomb, and we'll all become fizzy widgets in the eternal alchemical thingy. The eternal alchemy, Matcha breathed, dabbing at her tears. Oh, Colby. You were listening. Spill, Matcha. Matcha jumped nervously. It was his idea, she said, pointing at Henst. He made a deal with the King of Kriata. If Henst could take over Lion's Arch, King Bade would recognize his authority as a fellow royal and lend him troops and ships to secure the city and drive out all non-humans. Lion's Arch would become a new home for displaced Ascalonians, and Henst would be their king. Kobaya prodded her again. Now the part about Aisei and the bomb on the Nomad. The Asura's shoulders slumped, and her voice fell. Henst told Grimjaw to make the bomb that was supposed to take out Aisei. My job was to put the bomb on the ship because I could get there without anyone seeing me. To the Asura's credit, she looked as chagrined as she did bitter. Originally, Henst was going to buy a ship and get his own seat on the council. But one vote wouldn't have been enough. He needed more. So we came up with a plan. Henst gave his money to Yam to buy a seat instead, and then he planned to kill Ia. Henst was her first mate. He'd inherit her seat on the council. With Aisei dead, I could convince Kobaya to leave the city. Henst, Grimjaw, and Yam could all vote against spending more money on the city's defenses, And once Lion's Arch was unprotected, King Bade's troops would sweep in and declare Henst king of the city. What was Grimjaw getting? How did Henst convince him to help? Kobaya pressed her ruthlessly. Henst made Grimjaw a deal. Once Henst took over the city, he'd use Bade's backing to give Grimjaw ships, and Grimjaw would convince the non-humans leaving Lion's Arch to crew them. He'd get what he wanted, an armada to go attack or. I'm betting neither Henst nor Bade would give a flap at that point if those ships were successful, so long as they left Lion's Arch. Matcha's ears wiggled despondently. Henst also promised to give Grimjaw the pride. She shook her head. Stupid Char believed him. This is all ridiculous. Grimjaw bellowed from the other side of the room. The Asura's lying. Not a word of it is true. If Matcha put a bomb on the Nomad and she wants to admit it, then that's her concern. I had nothing to do with any of it, and neither did Henst. For his part, Henst stood silently by Isaiah's side, looking like a thunderous storm cloud. He kept his hands on his sword hilts, and his eyes glittered with anger. Henst wasn't going to give you the pride anyway, you drooling git. He was going to give it to King Bade. Matcha snorted derisively. The pride was mine, he promised, Grimjaw said, his temper flaring. You take that back. In the echo of his words, Kobaya felt rather than heard every person in the room turn to stare at the Char. And there, ladies and gentlemen, Matcha said, gesturing with a flourish, I give you the ancient Asuran legal tradition of testimony by idiot. You can't prove anything, Henst snarled. You have no evidence. Where were you when the bomb was placed on the Nomad? Kobaya said accusatorily. You were off ship, weren't you? Because you knew the ship would be attacked. Most of the crew was off ship. We were on shore leave, Henst retorted. True. But I'll bet most of the crew didn't take their rucksack ashore that night. Unlike you, they were planning on coming back to the ship. But you knew the Nomad would be on fire, didn't you, Henst? So you took all your important possessions off the ship and stored them somewhere safe. Kobaya's eyebrows knitted together with anger. Unluckily for you, I saw your bag at Yum's shop, though I didn't connect the two at the time. No B. Tarb Henst stays here, Kobaya directed them. Moran, go to Yum's and search that rucksack. If Matcha's story is true, we'll find proof there. Letters, I'd imagine, signed by King Bade. In an instant, Henst drew his swords. You are too clever by far, Kobaya Mariner. Grimjaw's weapons followed in the blink of an eye, a dagger in one hand and a pistol in the other. Isay stood trapped by a field of weapons, her jaw tensed and her face pale. Not a move, Captain Isay. I wouldn't want to spill blood on the council floor. Henst spoke quietly, raising one of his swords to Isay's throat as his eyes flicked to Kobaya and the others. We're going to back out of the room, and you're going to let us, or I'm afraid she dies. If you leave, Grimjaw sets off the bomb, and we all die anyway. That is, if I'm understanding all this madness. Old Captain Moran pushed his chair away from the table, rolling to his feet with the sway of a practiced sailor. He drew his mace and tamped the heavy spiked ball rhythmically into his hand. The hell if I'll just sit on my thumb and go quietly. Nobody's going anywhere, Kobaya growled, his cutlass already in his hand. Notaby rose as well, and Hedda and Tarb, the first cracking her knuckles, and the second reaching for the hilt of his heavy warhammer. With a smile of grudging admiration, Nodobi said, For once I am forced to agree with my associate Captain Mariner. Henst snarled. Then it would appear we're at an impasse. Not on my account. Before Henst could react, Isai thrust her elbow into his ribcage and grabbed for the sword in his left hand. Henst staggered, relinquishing the weapon, but when he snapped back, he was twice as angry. He shoved Isay, knocking her newly seized sword aside, and cracked his fist viciously against her jaw. Grimjaw and Croaker paused, exchanged a swift look, and ran. "Get them," Hedda yelled, lunging over the captain's table. "Don't let the char escape." Several of the others raced forward, joining in the fight. Kobaya spun Matcha around and shoved her toward Moran. "Osh!" he yelled to his old friend. "Tie her up, we'll deal with her after this is handled." Moran quickly stripped a long sash from his waist. Ignoring the Asura's protests, he bodily lifted Masha and placed her in a chair, twining the sash through the heavy wooden arms and around her wrists. With a seaman's quick knots, he secured the rope, locking her inside the chair. "What if the bomb goes off?" Matcha wailed. "Then we're all done for," he retorted gruffly. "So you better stop complaining and start praying." With that, he turned his back on her and stormed across the room toward the fight. "Asura, don't pray," Matcha screamed after him, jolting about in her chair. The old gray captain ignored her and kept walking. "Let me go. You hear me? Moran? Moran, don't walk away from me. There's a bomb, didn't you hear? Let me go."